managing editor. It's really exciting to leave the newsroom, which I've been working on, and so I haven't seen everyone here, so it's really fun to get into the conference. Oh! I haven't been to the conference yet. I've been in the newsroom. My name's Tanya Pampalone, and I'm GIJN's managing editor. I didn't know that we were fancy and using, I forgot about the microphone. I'm so glad that you guys are here and as excited as I am about this panel. It's going to be a fun one. So the one thing that I was asked to do by my colleague who's running the Instagram channel for GIJN and the conference is please go to our Instagram channel. We have a great team that Kaz is running, and it's the student journalists, so please follow them. They're doing some really fun stuff on Instagram. Yeah. So that's my plug from GIJN. And then without further ado, thanks for coming to the panel. We've got some great panelists this morning to talk about their work. I'm going to introduce to you Susanne Reber from Scripps, Philip Faigle from Zeit Online, and Erlend Arntsen here from VG in Norway. And I am going to just let them go on with their presentations because they really are amazing and will speak for themselves. We'll run through all the presentations, and at the end, I'd love to take questions. Thanks.
Hello. Yeah, so my name is Erlend Arntsen. I work in the Norwegian newspaper VG, and together with a team from my newspaper, we did this story about the so-called Tinder swindler, and I will try to give you an inside look into how we did it, but also try to say something about why it seemed to work so well on the smartphones. This is VG's most read story ever, with over 2.2 million page views. But before I go on, a short introduction.
Han har forført og svindlet unge kvinner for millioner.
Nu kommer det här låta jättekonstigt, men han är ju väldigt omtänksam och mån.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see you, by the way.
Han är väldigt gentleman i måten han ter sig på och uppför sig.
Han møter offrene sine på Tinder, deretter forfører han dem med reiser i privatfly, luksushoteller og dyre middager.
Det här är ju ingen vanlig bedragare. Den här människan är på en helt annan nivå.
Kvinnene tror de dater en velstående forretningsmann, men andre kvinner han har lurt, betaler for luksusen. Han forteller at han er i trøbbel, så spør han om å låne penger.
I would like to ask you a favor.
Hvor mye penger hadde det blitt til slutt?
Jag tror det är 2,1 mil. Man blir rätt och slett hjärnvaska och stök på en måte som jag trodde att jag aldrig kunde bli.
You destroyed my life, Simon!
Nobody has fucking frauded nobody.
Okay, so every story starts somewhere, and this one started with a tip from this woman, Norwegian citizen, but London resident Cecilie Fjellhøy. She told us that she, during the spring of 2018, had been swindled for over 200,000 euros by this man who called himself Simon Leviev, and whom she had met for the first time in January of that year. Her email included keywords such as private jets and the self-proclaimed son of a diamond billionaire, so of course you look into something like that. And the first we did was to ask her for more documentation. What she did then was to trust us with this. She exported her full WhatsApp dialogue with this man during a span of 5 months, contact every day. And this included text, images, videos, and sound. We fed this into a Google Drive document, and it turned out to be like the backbone of our story, both with regards to the fact-checking, the building the timeline, and of course to build a story and take the viewers through the different steps of Simon's manipulative game. After we had got an overview of this documentation, we went to London to interview her in depth over several hours. And in the storytelling, it turned out to be very important that we, during this interview, asked her to, it's very simple, but we asked her to tell it in present tense. So instead of her saying, he made me feel very well, she took the viewer back to that day where she instead said, he makes me he feel very well, if you took my point. And this was part of a larger thing we thought a lot about, and that was to create the identification between the viewer and Cecilia. So that, yeah, it was important for us that the viewer, we wanted the viewer to really understand why she could fall in love with this man, and we then also reached out for parts of the documentation where he presented himself as Mr. Perfect. Let's have a look at that.
Når du starter å date noen, så lurer du alltid spesielt en fyr som det der. Bare tenkte jeg, han må ha flere som han driver og møter og sånn. Så tenkte jeg bare etter hvert bare, men hvordan kan han det? Han er alltid tilgjengelig. Og det det jeg synes gir meg en så trygghet da.
It never feel this way, never. If you will ever tell me, I won't even imagine it or even believe it. And I couldn't agree more.
Det mye chatting, og det veldig mye følelser veldig tidlig.
Thinking about a lot about you. Want to spend some time together, go to a warm place, kiss you, hug you. How was your day?
So she met this man in January of 2018, and in May the same year she breaks up with him. After the relationship has turned sour, she understands that it's all about the money. He's constantly needing more money, and she breaks contact with him, and he threatens her quite severely. But Cecilia's story ends there. But our story does not, and we wanted to find more about this man. So the next thing we did was we went to Israel, which is his home country. We knew that from what Cecilia told us, but also from some finished court documents that we had retrieved earlier on. And in Israel, we were able to confirm not only his identity, but his identity to the pictures we had of him, which was really important for us. At the same time, we had a short meeting with his mom and lawyer and previous victims. But Simon was not there. So we went back to our research, and what Cecilia also had given us was her Amex transactions. And as you probably have seen, when you buy a flight ticket through your American Express card, the one who's traveling is also visible. So that's how we found the name of Pernilla Sjöholm, a Swedish woman. And when we contacted her, she was shocked to understand that what she thought was a close friend was a swindler, and she realized that she also had lost a lot of money to him. So I flew to Stockholm the next day, and after we got in contact with her, and during that meeting, she tells me that the very next day she has a meeting with him in Munich, in Germany. Which is like 18 hours away. So I contact my superiors right after the meeting, and we scramble a team and travel to Munich. And 12 hours later, we are 4 people in Munich. And it's important to mention that Pernilla was going anyway, and there was no way stopping her to do that. And then we decided to go after her with her permission. So what we did in Munich was to use the Find My Friends thing on your iPhones, so that we could track her GPS location with her consent all day. And that, that was like also for safety, of course, but still it was the thing that would lead us to him later that night to Mandarin Oriental downtown Munich, where we were able to secure this footage. And yes, it is that very feeling when you see someone for the first time that you have spent months studying on a screen. We did not confront him here, and that's because many people ask that question, and that's because we don't want a situation out of our control in Munich. But still, it was of high importance to document that this is a man that's possible to find, something that the European police authorities did not seem very eager to do. So back in Oslo, we had a couple of weeks. We pushed the deadline forward, and we had a couple of weeks to build the story. And what you're seeing here is that it's the different scenes, and we sort them in positive scenes, negative scenes, and action-filled scenes, and we try to stack them every other to create a dynamic story as possible. Quite simple, but very, very, very effective. And some clues to why it works so well on smartphone could be that, of course, the vertical format it says itself, but the vertical format is very obvious because of the documentation we got through the WhatsApp logs. Basically our story was authentically shot on an iPhone. It's also where like the action is happening, a lot of it. It's where he does his manipulation. So the scene of the crime is in many ways the smartphone itself. And when you add all this up to that, most readers use VG on their smartphone. It's like the perfect combination. But also some other clues. So this is a story it's short action-filled videos that drives it forward. But we use text bridges to like get you to the next video, and we then used very, very small amounts of text to prevent the reader from like stumbling into large bulks of texts. It's not interactive. There's no way to get lost in this story in a fancy map or whatever. It's just like a highway down to bumping up our completion rate of the story. It's also some hints of gamification with these small Tinder flames that when you read one part, you feel you reach the next level or something like that. And we also texted up absolutely everything because we know that half of our users don't use sound on when they watch video on VG. But maybe the most important part was reconstructing the WhatsApp dialogue.
Ok, da starter jeg å skrive som Simon, og så skriver du som Cecilie.
Ja. Det er Cecilies mobil vi ser, så det første jeg gjør er å sette på skjermopptak på mobilen. Hvis du ikke har det på mobilen, går du på innstillinger, kontrollsenter, tilpass kontroller, legg til skjermopptak.
These are, by the way, my brilliant colleagues who should be standing here instead of me. I'm the boring classical journalist in this team. So this is the usual stats on long reads in VG. It's a 50-year-old male reader, usually, with a 10% completion rate. And compared to this story, well, the page views talks for itself, but what we found interesting was that the demography changed a lot with many more female readers and a younger audience. But most of all, which was really interesting and impressed us, was the 50% completion rate. So, and if anyone's wondering what's happening to Simon today, this summer in Greece, he was arrested due to a false passport. During a couple of days in court, he accepted to be extradited to Israel, and as we speak, we are waiting for the exact date that's going to happen. But it seems like he may have done a new good bargain for himself, because it's apparently so that his swindling of women in Europe can't be prosecuted in Israel. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Susanne will be up next. I just wanted to say it really was a terrific story. We saw it at GIJN, and we did a case study on it, how they did it, which was fantastic, and it really kind of described how they went through this process, because we were so excited about it. And it's actually, and I was so excited when I saw it. I showed my teenage daughter, who is struggles with reading an investigative story, as you can imagine, and she watched the whole thing. She was a completion rate for you. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. So it was really exciting. It was really fun to be able to do that. I think engage younger people with investigative journalism. So well done. Yeah. And Susanne up next.
Hey. I thought I was going to go last. Oh, sorry. Got to get my glasses. Embarrassing. Yeah, so I think that was an incredible story. I remember the first time that came out, I was definitely one of the completion rate people as well. So I think what I want to talk about really is like, for me, you know, storytelling and how to tell a story, how many ways to tell a story has been kind of a journey that I've been on for a long time. And for me, it's been an evolution of thinking about how to approach really what is it we're doing when we do really in-depth reporting. I've always loved investigative reporting. I've been a team leader of multiple teams. And we focus a lot on the journalism for obvious reasons, because we, at this conference, are learning how to be the best investigative reporters we can. And we also do incredibly cool presentations. But I think one of the questions I'm going to sort of try and challenge us with is how much do we actually talk about the audience, and what is the audience doing, and where is the audience moving, and what is it that we can do to not only project at them, but actually think about who they are and why we need to communicate with them, and using the form following kind of that question. So for me, that question about who is your audience and how will they experience your story? Again, it may sound a little kumbaya, but at the end of the day, when we're doing a story, somebody is engaging in it. Somebody is watching it, listening to it, reading it. You know, I've done, you know, radio, audio, television, film, documentary, books, plays, all kinds of different things. But at the end of the day, when somebody is reading your story, they're having an experience, and it's probably emotional. And I think that is a factor that we cannot ignore. And so in my thoughts, as I've been sort of, you know, learning, every year we learn new things, is trying to put that question up front more in our story meetings, in our production meetings, as we're actually investigating, asking ourselves, what are we doing with this story, and what are we trying to communicate? And so I've got a few examples. Some of these are not necessarily the newest stories, but they mean something to me in terms of the questions that we were asking. So this is an example of a story. I worked at the Center for Investigative Reporting for over 6 years, and it's kind of a innovation kitchen in a lot of ways. But when I think about creativity, generally speaking, it's actually a problem that you're trying to solve. So if you're having an issue with your investigative story, in this case, we were doing an investigation about one of the most problematic issues of incarceration in the United States, which is already one of the most troubling incarceration rates in the world. But what we were looking at was teens in jails, and how much they were being actually thrown into solitary confinement, which according to the UN and other international bodies is a human rights abuse. So here we are investigating this incredibly important issue, and we find that we have like absolutely zero access to any of the people that are actually experiencing this. So, you know, what do you do when you have no access? What do you do when you still want to tell the story? What do you do when you know that this is a story that's going to be consumed heavily because people actually care about these teens? So that question and the fact that we wanted it to be shareable, we wanted to use social media, drove the format that we used. I'm just going to give you a little look at this. Oh, wait, what's happening here? All right, there it goes.
Being in the box as a teenager, it took a toll. Being in the box as a teenager, it took a toll on me mentally. Why would you want to put a kid through?
Sorry, guys. Isn't it supposed to just like if I want to play it?
Let's see if we can open it. Is it this one?
Sorry?
Is it this one?
Yes. So what do I do?
I'm not 100% sure. Let's just... Should open, but... Okay.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, sorry, I definitely prefer my Mac, that's for sure. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, great. All right, I'll just play you a little bit of this. Thank you.
Being in the box as a teenager, it took a toll on me mentally. Why would you want to put a kid through this? My mother was actually diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 13. I had to witness her go through chemotherapy and radiation treatment. So, you know, my mother lost all her hair, all of that stuff. So, you know, at the age of 13, you know, that took a toll on me. My grades started to decrease. I guess you could say I linked up with the wrong crowd. At the age of 15 was actually the first time I was actually put in handcuffs. I was arrested, brought to the precinct and everything. At the age of 16, I was remanded to Rikers Island. When the bus came, he had the shackle.
All right, thank you very much for your help. So, as you can obviously tell, we decided to solve our problem of the no access by creating an animation. Thank you, yeah, that's the next one. An animation that we knew would be a way to hopefully tell the story, and by using the actual audio of the former inmate who had been in Rikers but had now come out. So we really only could speak to somebody who's already come out, and he had become a youth social worker. And this character that you heard his voice was for us a key character that in other treatments of the story, because we also did video, we had long form, we cast him extremely carefully to be potentially able to do more than one medium. But it was a collaboration of many sorts, and I wanted to kind of get you to hear also the soundtrack. So what do you do when you've got to solve a problem, and also you don't know how to do that? Like, I was very appreciative that you explained to us how to do the texting thing, right? We know we want to do things that might engage the audience, but how do you do that if you don't have the skills? And so again, I'm trying to appeal to you to think about the kinds of collaborations we talk a lot about at the Global Conference is editorial collaboration, investigative collaboration. And I'm really here to also say there are many people they're either in your newsroom or then in the art college next to your newsroom, who have amazing skills that can help you make your stories wonderful. The illustration in the box was actually done by, at the time, she was our intern, and I watched her doodling in one of our meetings. She was a very introverted girl. She's now an illustrator based on the work she did there. And we also collaborated with a musician, Mos Def. He's a very well-known rapper, and he gave us access to one of his songs for free because he cared so much about this issue. So it's just thinking a lot about your audience, and for us the key question is we want to get this out to youth audiences and we needed to make it shareable, and so that thing really did a rounds. I want to show you another example of something that started with a problem. We investigated the incredible abuses of certain kinds of visas in the US called H-1Bs, and H-1Bs are used by the tech industry heavily to bring coders and folks to the Silicon Valley from all over the world, mostly South Asia. And then they're often almost indentured for coming to the US on these phony sort of H-1B mills where people are told, like, we'll get you a job, but then they're there and they can't move and they can't do anything. So we have this amazing story. It's about Silicon Valley. It's got a huge reach. But we know that the people who most need to see the story are not in the United States, but they're actually in India. So what do you do about that? How do you create something that you know you can make it so that it might potentially be translatable in a way and very shareable? So we actually created this graphic piece, not just because it was also pretty and beautiful, and again, it was one of our journalists who'd actually was also an artist, and he drew a lot of it. But it allowed us to use the text boxes, and it makes it easier to have it translated because the text that you can pop into the boxes can actually travel very easily. So the art sort of speaks for itself, tends to be more universal, using the characters, and then the text was, we were then able to collaborate with publications in India who were able to help us get this out to a really large audience of people who most needed to see the story. So another thing that tends to happen with our investigative stories is we have amazing complexity. We have to deal with documents, we have to deal with large amounts of data. So again, coming from a broadcast environment where I've done a lot of audio and video stuff, like data is always a bit of a problem. Like, how do you make data interesting to your audience so that it's not just a factoid, but something they can actually experience and understand and makes it more relevant? So we were doing a story about earthquakes. And, in California, journalists know a lot about earthquakes because they have them all the time. However, Michael Corey, who was our head of data at the time, was looking at Oklahoma earthquakes because it sort of occurred to him, like, why are there so many earthquakes in Oklahoma? And that had to do with fracking. However, we then looking at how can we make this data understandable to a radio audience, because our main platform after 2013, 2014 was a radio show called Reveal. So we had some brainstorming, and we decided, like, what if we bring this data to life in a new way? And we actually created some music. So now I'm trying to get in here and actually get the, how do I get to the, I just want you to hit the,
this one.
That's it, okay, thank you. So, okay, great. this is the place where I'd love to ask you guys a question.
From WNYC Studios and Snap Judgment's underground lair.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Snap Judgment. Battle.
It's actually kind of a palpable feeling, right, to experience how the popcorn thing starts happening at the end. I played you the raw file. The way that we used it in the show is we actually played this sonification to our host, Arntsen, in a kind of real-time way in the studio. We didn't really let him hear it ahead of time, and we had him reacting in the moment. And he literally was saying things like, wow, did you hear that? Like, wow. And as you probably heard, there were sort of moments where there was like a really big bang in the middle there. That was actually one of the most damaging earthquakes in Oklahoma. And as you can hear, as that's 10 years going by, and you're feeling it, you're actually understanding what does it mean when suddenly an industry comes in and actually causes something that never really happened in Oklahoma before. At the time we were doing this story, the Oklahoma government was still denying that this was even a thing, right? Even though the data existed. So the story took on sort of a life of its own. I brought it here because this is open code, like we wrote it in a way that it's shareable. You can go on the Reveal site, you can go and find how it was done, you can try it out. I'm just trying to encourage you to think about your audience as you're approaching some of these problematic issues. In the last year or so, I left Reveal and I've been really focusing on what else is going on with our audience right now. And I think we all know it because we all do it. We are the, whatever, billions of people that are watching Netflix now in the world. We are the very folks that are streaming and binge watching the latest thing. And in the audio world, that exact same phenomenon is happening as well. It's growing very quickly. It's not quite at the Netflix level yet. However, audiences travel and they go where they can experience things, and they are telling us a bunch of things in the way that they're consuming stories now. They want high production values. They want to control when and how they're going to watch what we're delivering, and so I think it behooves us to pay attention to what that is. So I'm really trying to learn as much as I can about serialized podcasting. And so last year, I worked on a story. Sorry. Okay, I am definitely a Mac girl because all I'm trying to do is play the video. Okay, there we go.
Hi, I'm Noor Tagori. I thought I understood sex trafficking in the US. The criminals, the victims, but when I actually met the people doing sex work, I realized I didn't know half the story.
You know, I really want to try to do sex work on my own, like without somebody else forcing me to do it. And it was a really positive, empowering experience.
Come with me on a journey across the country to meet the real people who are part of this world.
I never knew nothing about human trafficking. I never knew that I was being exploited.
Are trafficking and drugs connected?
Absolutely.
To be honest, I used to talk down on it, like paying someone for sex, but now my whole mindset's changed and I'm a part of it.
And by the end, I promise you will never look at the sex trade the same way again. Sold in America premieres October 10th. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts.
All right, so we tackled a kind of pretty meaty issue in terms of sex trafficking in the United States. It's a $2 billion industry. It was a multi-platform project, so it was video and audio. But when we started doing the podcast, there were a lot of people who kind of rolled their eyes and said, well, nobody's going to listen to a podcast about sex trafficking. It's like way too thorny, and how can you do, multiple, I think we did 9 episodes. How can you do that on something like that? So I actually wanted to use a technique that I first heard about at Reveal, but really wanted to try on this, and we were the first podcast to actually do this. And what we did is we used texting technology and bots to say, okay, we actually don't believe that nobody's going to listen. Well, millions of people listened, and also we think that there's a conversation people want to have about this. because it's in every community, and women and girls and boys actually are being trafficked all the time into the sex trade, and we feel like this is a conversation people want to have. So we used a company called Ground Source, which again, you can look them up. They are really skilled at using texting as a way to engage the audience. So I'm gonna play you a little bit how we use that.
As a reporter, as an activist, reducing harm to women became everything to me. I want to constantly talk about this and get people talking about it. So I started working with a team of journalists from Newsy. Their names are Kate, Eric, and Kevin, and we set out to shoot a documentary and record for this podcast. Okay, I just want to pause for a second. We're going to try something new here. We really want you to be on this journey with us. So I'm going to give you a special phone number. You can write it down or save it to your phone, and throughout this show, you will be able to text this phone number to get pictures of us throughout our journey and to just share your thoughts, concerns, and own experiences.
Right, I'm gonna wrap up. So basically, it was a massive conversion. Again, people say people don't convert from one medium to the other. We ended up with actually 20,000 people who directly engaged with us, who wrote to us, who talked to us, who sent us voicemails. And I can just say from having listened to every single one of them, because I was monitoring the feed, very sophisticated conversations, sometimes 6-7 minute long, these voicemails would be. So we ended up doing 2 bonus episodes just based on the public response, obviously mediated because we couldn't play all of them. And so involving your audience in a real conversation, not only does it pay off in terms of potential content, but it actually gives them a stake in the story that you're producing. So there you go. I hope that you'll collaborate with people in your newsroom and outside and try some new things to engage your audience. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Susanne. That was terrific to hear. I loved about like kind of my big question is how do we start small actually, because these things are so beautiful and they can be quite intimidating, I think, to traditional journalists. And so it's lovely to hear that, like, you know, the illustrator came from within the newsroom, and there are so many resources within our newsroom that we can utilize, and so it's lovely to see that. Yeah. So next up is Philip, and yeah, please.
So thanks. I'm very impressed by the stories that were shown so far. My name is Philip. I'm leading a special section at Zeit Online. We are a digital newsroom with more than around 100 people in Germany. We have a print publication called Die Zeit. It's a very old and famous newspaper, and it's Germany's largest weekly. And before I want to show you some of the stories that we did, I would like to share like 3 mini lessons, small lessons that I personally made in the last 2 or 3 years. So the first thing is that if you want to induce innovation and if you want to induce new storytelling in your newsroom, we made very good experiences with small teams that are doing that. So this is actually my team at the moment. It was founded in 2019 in May this year. And as you can see, we are not so many people. But our job is to influence the whole newsroom. So we try to think about new ways of storytelling and then engage the rest of the newsroom and to roll it out. And the second lesson maybe is that, so small teams is a very good idea to influence the newsroom. The second one is that what we are trying to do at the moment is, we saw, for example, this big story, the Tinder swindler and so on, and we're also doing these bigger stories, but we are trying also now, not only to do these big stories, but also this new way of storytelling every day or every week. So we try to find workflows to find little ideas to tell our stories in a different, more creative way. And one way to do it is we put all the relevant people together in the newsroom. So a special thing about the Zeit Online newsroom in Berlin is that our developers, for example, sit next to us. So all the tech peoples are there, and they even think journalistically. This is our newsroom. Not so pretty, but it works. And we are also sitting next to our experts for visual journalism, our data journalists. We have 2 data scientists in the newsroom that are working with us. And it's really easy, so for example, to do a data story, we are much more faster than we were like in, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. In our newsroom, it was really like, if we wanted to do a data story, it took weeks or even months to come up with this story. And now sometimes we can do a data story in, I don't know, in a few days. And sometimes we also try to have like smaller ideas in our daily business. So now I want to show you some of the stories we did. Well, the story that we published, as one story that we published in May, was based on a data set. And the data set was quite breathtaking for us because it included all moves between West Germany and East Germany and West Germany after 1991. You may be aware of the political situation during the time, so it was shortly after the Berlin Wall came down. And a lot of people moved from East Germany to West Germany. But this data set showed us where all these people moved. We had no idea, not so exactly. And this data set consisted of around 6 million data points. And so we thought, okay, how to tell that story. And then our data department started their work, our data visuals, and then they came up with this. And that was, of course, a joke. I mean, like, that was not the data visualization. The story was like that. So this was a lot of work, but we try to show in this story. You can see this is the year 1991, and you can see like the big outflux of people from East to West Germany, and we showed it for every year. And I think this is also a learning for me. Because usually when we as investigative journalists, and I was an investigative journalist before, we think in single cases. So someone approaches us, and then we hear his story, we do an interview, and then we look for the bigger story behind it. But what we learned in our investigative and data team and in our daily work, that sometimes it's the better way to look at the pattern first. And that's what we also did in this story. So we looked, so where is the big stream of people? And then we saw, okay, you see here, from Dresden to the south of Germany, that was the biggest stream of people. From Saxony, it's in the south of East Germany to the south of West Germany. And then we found, for example, that a lot of people from East Germany built an airport there in the 90s. And then for the people there in this this area, it was absolutely an old story. But for us and for most of our readers, it was a new story. And then, for example, we found this woman. She was one of the people moving there and helping to build up this new airport next to Munich. So this is really a learning for us. Maybe you can find very, very good stories in the data when you look at the data first and not afterwards. We also did the story. This is a city in East Germany, and it was the city that lost most of its people. And it's called Suhl. It was an industrial. It was a city with a strong industry in East Germany. And we looked at the data and said, "Oh well, this is amazing how many people left." And then we tried to find a very pregnant, a very good way to present that, and that was what we did. This is something completely different. we wanted to do a story about the youth in Germany. And we thought how to do that. And at that time, there were a lot of articles and portraits of the new young generation and so on. And then we decided, okay, let's do something else. Let's build a platform for their voices. So the headline says 123 voices of the youth. And we asked them to send us WhatsApp messages. And we said to them, okay, if you send us these WhatsApp messages, we will present them on our website. And that's what we did. This was really like the head of the Zeit's website. And we built this little tool where you can listen to every single young person and listen to what they have to say. We also use drones since a few years. This is a story about 3 babies that were born in very different parts of the world, in Colombia, in Norway, and in Mongolia. And to show where they live, we used the drone and made showed a bigger picture. This is also a data story we did, and this is like a bit of linguistics. So in the German parliament, there's a protocol. Every word that is said in the German parliament is recorded and transcribed. And this data was available for us. So we presented it to our readers in a full text search. So you could look up every word that was said and how often it was said. And that was a very, very, very useful tool. This says Klimaschutz, it means climate protection. So you can see, for example, that the first time when this word was mentioned, it was 1980. This is also a data story. This was after the European election, and we thought, okay, we want to have a bigger picture of what happened in Europe, and this map showed for every little piece of Europe how people voted and for which party they voted. This is the voting result. For Berlin, as you can see, it was Berliners voted very green. And this is also a very simple idea. This wasn't only a story, it was also on our website. So when you came to Zeit Online, all these cups were falling down between the headlines and between the text. And it shows the number of each coffee cup that is thrown away statistically while you are reading this piece. And we did it because people are bored by big numbers, right? If you hear there are 8 million coffee cups thrown away every week, or you think you have no imagination, but this is, I think, this really pinpoints the problem in our case. This was a big research we did about attacks on refugee shelters, and this was really classical investigative journalism. So we really called and did research about every attack and asked how many convictions have been done, and but then at the end we just publish it like this. So it says 222 attacks on refugees in this year, and 4 convictions yet. So this is the last thing. It's a bit more funny thing. This was an investigative story about how the Secret Service of the GDR spied in computer games. And we allowed our readers to play this computer game on our website. So it was possible to play the whole game on Zeit Online's website. And we also did, of course, it was fun for everybody, but also, I mean, like, people could have a feeling how it was to be spied in that computer game. So these were my examples, and thanks a lot.
Thanks, that was so fun. I'm a big data visualization fan, and I love what they're doing with data, but I can't help but, like, I'm always looking for the thinking small. And I love the WhatsApp messages, something that we can all do in our newsrooms, which is quite cool to like get the characters into the story. The other thing I loved was the single fact story. I mean, I think it's so like underutilized. It's like pull that out and put it in a graphic, and you've got you're getting the word out to people in such a simple and direct way. I don't know if any of you want to comment about anything. My big thing is just kind of like trying to figure out how to start small, and wanted to ask you guys just a little bit more about like thinking small and where you can begin with kind of like new technologies when you don't have a lot of resources in the newsroom like most of us. And we've talked a little bit about that. And the other thing is kind of what are some of the tools that you're seeing that you might be able to utilize? I know, I can't remember the name of I actually meant to look it up, as NPR has that kind of back end where you can tap into, where they offer the code up on simple apps. And they allow you to, it's kind of like steal our code for these cool apps. But if there's anything else like that any of you could comment on, and then I just want to open it up to the floor while they're answering, if anybody's got questions.
Are you asking how to start small? Or?
Yeah, just like how do you think small instead of thinking big? I think it's kind of like where do you
I always
start?
watch my kids. I kind of look at what my kids are using, and when they switched off Facebook and didn't use it anymore, I was like, oh. There we go. So yeah, I think there is like this whole idea of what technology are. It's interesting how we're journalists are very perceptive, and we tend not to actually think about what are we doing, and what technology is kind of fascinating. And you could see like years before the flight from Facebook, if you watched your kids, they were on Instagram. That's what they were doing. So I think it's like what is out there. And can I use that technology, in my stories? Can I use that technology to present my story? Just sort of looking around you, I think is a good indicator of, and I think you guys did that very well, Could I use this to make not just my story cool, but actually get it out there,
Great. Philip, did you have something you wanted to add to that? Yeah, okay.
A short question to our colleague from Norway. I didn't understand why you didn't confrontate the Israeli guy at the Mandarin Oriental Munich.
Yeah. So the first thing was that Pernilla, the Swedish woman we were with, she did not want us to interfere, because she at that point wanted him to believe that she still believed in him and his story. Because her plan in the longer course was to somehow lead the police to him at a later point. So that was sort of the premise for the situation. But even though that premise had not existed, with him being so close to her at that very moment, we thought that we could create an unpredictable situation to confront him there. And we were later on able to confront him with our documentation and accusations, and so we solved that later on.
Thanks for that. I think somebody had a question over here. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm in love with your story, the VG story, and as two people completed it, I'm sure in the hall many people have completed that story. I think the most interesting thing, fascinating, and I would like to ask you about this. First, did you expect this? Did you see this happening, that this story will go viral? And the second, what was the discussions between the team of why really this happened? I think the fascinating thing that it was not interactive, and now there is a very viral thing of interactivity. I'm one of the people who very much worked in interactive things. I led a team called Palestine Remix, a very interactive website. But this, you challenged all of us. You said without interactivity, just one line, and with very deep story but very short text, you can do different things. And so I would like to know, would people in the team expected this? Did they know they were doing something so different? Or it was a surprise somehow to even the people who worked on this? And I think also the confrontation did not happen well. And it's still, at the end, the real confrontation did not happen. And the case is that he's still like semi-free, the guy.
Yes, so I think we knew that we had a story that would reach a broad audience if translated into English. It was a story with victims all over Europe, yeah, so we had a vague idea that it could go that way. But we were, of course, we were surprised when the response was the way it was. And what was the second question about our choices? Yeah. We had discussions about that, and there were certain editors that were skeptical to that idea. Should we do more like a classical long read? Could we waste this story on an experiment that doesn't go so well? But because the material was so unique and so smartphone-ish, or what you would say, we chose to go the other way, and we have experienced a lot of time that people drop out of the story at the early point because it's too technical and too difficult to hang on. So we just thought, how can we do this as simple as possible? And that included making some choices about interactivity and all those other things as well. And I just want to add to the completion rate. Why it's important is that you want people to get the full scope of your story. You don't want a reader to get accusations in the beginning, but not the accusated person's response, who usually comes later on, you know? So that's why completion rate should be a goal for everyone. And how do you reach that? And ask that in every story.
Yeah, that's great. I think a lot of people did get through that piece.
Hi, I have a question. Like, do you collaborate with like old-fashioned traditional reporters from your media? And if you do, how does it work out? Because you work just by your team.
Yes, we do. Well, I mean, like we have a Zeit Online has a very old print mother, die Zeit, and of course this is more traditional journalism, but we also doing teams together. So, for example, this story about refugee shelters, the attacks on refugee shelters, we did it together with very traditional reporters of the print publication, and this is also one way how we grow together, like from the digital and the print side. I mean, like our idea is like to have like traditional stories. Of course, you want to do a normal report. You want to have a good text, but then you want people to read it. And maybe what we are trying to do is to find an interesting way to present it. And this is one part of our job.
Did you collaborate from the very beginning? Who was in charge?
Well, it depends. But for example, this story about refugee shelters was long research. I think it was 3 months, and this was a team of print people, online data journalists, visual experts, and so on. And they worked together, yes, from the beginning.
Who made all the decisions in the team?
She's asking who made the decisions in the team. And I think these are really important questions because this is about convergence and traditional newsrooms and how you make project teams. And we don't have, a lot of newsrooms don't have project teams. I think you guys are quite lucky, actually, that you're able to work across the newsroom.
Well, it depends who makes a decision. I mean, like, it's a lot of moderation. If you have a lot of teams involved, then you have to moderate these teams in different interests, of course. We have, most of the time, we have one project leader who's running the project.
I think there's a project manager session, isn't there, going on at this conference, talking about those kind of issues.
I think just one thing that I've seen is you have to start with kind of letting people in your newsroom sort of observe kind of your newsroom and sort of put the right people in a room sometimes. I mean, the Oklahoma data story was really an engineer, right, who usually is mixing an audio show. He's a composer, he's got a musical brain, and giving him the ability to sit with, you know, the data guy and just let them go off and like play and figure out stuff. Because in a way, I think the teams can then be the best persuasion for maybe some other folks in your newsroom who might not get like, well, what's the deal here? Why is this cool? So I think what it is, it's sort of a sandbox approach. You know, you can't actually persuade other people to do things if you don't like let people have a little bit of scope to have a low risk way to just like at least brainstorm, play around with the idea of how could we answer this difficult question of this earthquake data going on a radio show and mattering. So I do think that a lot of it has to do with a culture of leaders at least letting people present those ideas, as opposed to saying, hey, bring me something cool. Like, it's more like, we have a problem, Houston, let's fix it. And actually, you'd be surprised what happens when you ask the question first, right?
Well, I like the idea of like sitting in the same room, but I'm wondering how, like, if you're in the newsroom and you want to get, because it does come from the top, like how do you, I mean, how did that happen in your newsroom that you were allowed to kind of have this room and all these access to all these people? I mean, you have a small team, and how do we convince leaders to kind of say, okay, well, we actually have to try and, you know, take people off diary, you know, kind of commit to doing news storytelling? It's a problem in the newsroom.
Well, I mean, maybe it's a bit different situation in our newsroom. I'm not sure. I mean, like, we don't have so much problems to convince people to do things like I showed to you. So people are really willing to do it. But I think what is really crucial in our newsroom is that really the tech people are with us, and this really made a difference. And they started to think in a journalistic way, and they come up with journalistic ideas, and this is really new. There was a developer, I think 2 weeks ago, and he came to me and had a really, really good idea for a story. And of course, he has absolutely another knowledge and a deeper knowledge of technology that maybe makes the story better. And this is, I think this is now daily work. This is a very helpful thing.
I mean, does anybody have any suggestions? Because I think it's a real thing of kind of trying to break through to newsrooms. Have you struggled with that, Susanne? Or you, Erlend?
I was just going to speak about your story. I mean, also you have to, I think, be an advocate for stuff that works. Like, so when something's working and you have these completion rates and you can show the data, you know, strut the data. I mean, hey, look, when we took a risk over here, here's what happened. I think you obviously there can be things that maybe don't work quite as well, you know, but I think if you can demonstrate, so for instance at Reveal, you know, so I'm the co-founder of the radio show Reveal. It's basically introducing a text, Center for Investigative Reporting has been around for 40 years. It's taking a room that was built on deep, long read culture and suddenly saying, our biggest platform is going to be a radio show that's going to reach millions and millions of people. And if you're not on this show, you're not taking advantage of the audience. But it's a scary thing. You know, you've got somebody who's maybe, you know, been a Pulitzer finalist or whatever, and you're saying, come on this radio show, and you don't actually know how to do it. So therefore, you have to try to work with people's maybe reluctance and actually show like, hey, if we can do this data story on the radio show, just think about how many people are gonna hear it. So I do try to talk about the data. I try and talk about the audience numbers. I try and show, before we even try the experimentation, what the advantage is. Look at all the people we could reach. And I think, again, he's got a great example that might allow your team to try some other really cool presentation style. So yeah, you have to be an advocate for stuff that works, and then hopefully that buys you license to try something. And not everything is expensive. I know we always think cool is expensive. It's not true, but it's definitely creative energy. It takes time.
What's cool and not expensive and kind of low skill? That's what I'm going back to thinking small. Do you have some suggestions? I mean, I love the WhatsApp message idea. I thought that was
It wasn't expensive. I mean, the experimentation with ground source was, I mean, I should probably not say this, but it was under $1,000 at that time. It was very much a let's try it agreement. I've got a big audience. Andrew wants to keep beta testing. People who are beta testing stuff are the best partners, right? Because they want to try it out. And he knew that there might be some, some issues because we were going to expose it to a lot of people. And he had never done that because he'd only worked with radio shows and some other partners. And so both parties learned from it, right? So you want to look for people who are also trying stuff and then hopefully team up,
Thanks. Okay, we're going to wrap it up. I just have one thing I wanted to ask you guys before we go, and the one thing is like a tool for me, like a low cost, almost nothing tool is Canva to help sell stories, and it's such an easy, you can generate an image and put a number on it, and and put it out on social media. For me, that's such a huge tool, and it's low cost and it helps sell your stories, which is part of what we need to do. Can each of you kind of name a tool that you use that you'd like to share that would help people? Should have asked them beforehand.
My favorite tool is VG's data team. I use them.
The VG data team, that is not fair.
I'm sorry. So maybe all credit to them also for the work on this story. That's my point.
I still think photography is so important, and nowadays you can take it on your iPhone, and frankly, some of it's really good. So photography is just a huge way to promote your story. People love images.
That's great. I think that's a really good one.
Well, I think the best tool that we are using is Slack, because it really makes things easy to, and if you have a certain complexity in your team and you have to deal with, I don't know, 4 or 5 teams and you have to moderate them, then it's very, very helpful to have Slack and not mail, actually.
Great, and that comes back to collaboration, I think, and that's what we're all here for. And I think just talking to your colleagues and finding out what skills they are and bringing them into a story is a great way to do new storytelling. So with that, it's 5:30. I think we have to get ready for tonight and party at the Muckrakers. I have to do a GIJN plug. I'm the managing editor at GIJN. We're always taking stories. We like to hear about innovative stories that are going on and to write about them or have you write about them or do a Q&A. So please pitch me, Tanya Pampalone at GIJN. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for coming.